Hey guys, welcome back to Fix It Friday. So this week I'm going to be working on something that I haven't shown on the channel for quite some time, and that is the Panasonic Q. So the Panasonic Q is a version of the Nintendo Gamecube that was only released in Japan, and what's really cool about it, aside from its really awesome physical exterior and backlit controller ports, is the fact that it can also play DVDs. So nowadays, it's really hard to get one of these things imported from Japan. They almost always break in shipping because the DVD drive mechanism uses very fragile plastic and that stuff shatters. And so yeah, bottom line is that they are very delicate and difficult to work with. So what we're going to be doing today with this particular Panasonic Q is installing the Picoboot, which is a open source mod chip for the Nintendo Gamecube by WebHDX, and I've shown it on the channel before. It's a really awesome, inexpensive mod chip that can allow you to easily play games via an SD card. So this one is also broken. I will be repairing it, but I'm not sure if I'm going to put that in this video, but I certainly will be showing you how to take apart a Panasonic Q completely and install the Picoboot. All right, let's get started. Okay, so before we really get into anything, the first major challenge with a Panasonic Q is taking this thing apart. So as you may have heard, there are a lot of screws, a lot of flex cables, and it's really easy to lose track and maybe break something or make it even worse. So if you happen to import one of these things, I always recommend before you do anything, before you give it power, before you try to do anything, you got to make sure that it's actually safe. These things get damaged in shipping, and little bits of plastic and sometimes screws come loose and flop around. This one, when you shake it, there isn't anything making noise, but it's very common when you take one of these apart to find little pieces of metal from the screws flapping around. And of course, if that shorts something out, you're going to damage your Q even more than it already is. So yeah, when you first get one of these, don't turn it on. First thing you really want to do is make sure it's safe in there. So we're going to go ahead and do a complete teardown of this thing. And so thankfully, it uses Phillips screws, and they're all the same size for most of the build. There's just these silver ones here on the side, but everything else is going to be these black Phillips screws right here. So the first order of business is to remove all of the screws on this back panel and the two side panels. And then if you tip it underneath, there are actually two hidden screws located here and here. And I've already gone ahead and taken those off. So I'm going to go ahead and just get all of those off camera, and then we're going to go ahead and start taking this thing apart further. Okay, so taking apart these side panels is very easy. You just lift them up and outward like this. And I've already gone ahead and removed one on the other side right there. And then to remove the back, there's actually like a little plastic flap here on the back. So if you just kind of get your fingernails under and push up, you can disconnect that. And then if you push over here, and over here, those parts are all now disconnected. And we're going to go ahead and just take these wiring harnesses and disconnect them on both sides. So there's two over here. And then on this side here, there's a flex cable and two more wiring harnesses. And you just have to disconnect those. And there we go. So the top is free. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is take the front panel off, which as long as you don't forget those bottom two screws, is going to come off pretty easily. So what we have to do is just kind of push this piece inward a little bit, like that. Now, it might be a little difficult just because of the fact that this DVD drive is messed up. Yep, there we go. And someone has definitely been in here before. You can see evidence of that, but that's not a big deal. Okay, and then this part here comes up just like how the front panel of a Gamecube does. It's the same general idea, same kind of flex cable. And you can see that there are some PCBs over here for the control panel, and then the standard Gamecube ports. Okay, so now this step here is probably, without question, the worst. And you need to have a screwdriver handy, and honestly, it really helps if you're left-handed, and thankfully I am. So the DVD drive is hooked right over here, and I believe over here, with these two pieces of metal. Now, because this thing is broken, it's just flapping freely, so it's just going to be lifted up a little bit and out like so, and flipped over like this. And then you can see that there are 3 flex cables, and you just pull them out from the main DVD board. 1, 2, 3. And now right over here, this is how the drive connects to the Gamecube. Normally there's a machine screw located. It seems to be missing with this one. So all I'm going to do is just lift it up. But normally you would have to get your screwdriver and remove that one screw. Okay. And so with all of that out of the way, the DVD drive is now free. All right, so we're going to continue with the teardown, and our next objective is to take this back panel off. So to do that, we're going to just go ahead and remove these 2 screws here, and these are holding the digital port in place. And this is a little bit different than what you see on a normal Gamecube because it's attached via a flex cable, and these are prone to failing, and they're also prone to interference. So you have to be really careful with them when you take them off or take them on. So I really try not to mess with them very much. Okay, so that's off. We're also going to remove this power connector here. This is what powers the DVD board. So you just pull this little white flap outward and then go ahead and just pull the wires out like that. And now we're going to go ahead and lift this up. And get it out of the way. And from here, everything should be free now so that this back panel can come off. And just like the front, you just kind of push these parts inward and it should just come straight off like how you saw me do it. All right, so now we've got 2 power PCBs. There's this bottom one here and this secondary one right here. So what I gotta do now is basically push these little standoffs and then lift upward. And that disconnects it from the rest of the Panasonic Q, like that. And this power PCB has a little plug right over here. So you just push and get that off, and so now that's free. And at this point, we're getting much closer to the end. So you can see here is the Gamecube motherboard. And at this point, it starts to resemble something a little bit more like a standard Gamecube. You can see it has these shieldings on the controller ports, and I've already gone ahead and removed the screws here for that, so you can just pull those off. And then all around are these black screws, which are slightly longer than the rest. So these you should keep separate. And I think there's 6 in total, 2 on each side. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those, and then at that point, we should be able to get the motherboard free. Okay, and finally there's just a couple more connections right here. Got to unplug this one right here. This is, I believe, sending the video and audio signals from the Gamecube over to this main DVD board. We've got this secondary, I believe, power connector here too. Pretty sure that's what this is. All right. Okay, and then the final thing is this little connector right over here in the back. This is the AV connection into the Gamecube, which is different than a standard Super Nintendo style multi-out, but it's doing the exact same thing. So you just have to pull that out. And now I believe finally we can gain access to the motherboard itself. Oh, almost. Okay, so now that we have the motherboard here, let's go ahead and remove the heatsink. And the way that I normally do this is I take a tool like this, just put it carefully under and just delicately lift up. You don't want to be aggressive here because there are some components like these small little diode arrays over here, and you can damage those if you're not careful. So, all right, the heatsink is off, and now we can have a look at the motherboard. And as you can see, it basically looks like a standard Gamecube motherboard. It's a Japanese region, and the only real major difference are the connectors. So you can see that there's this custom connector here instead of the Super Nintendo style multi-out. And then where the digital port normally goes directly, there's this little daughter board here with some components on it. and then the flex cable attaches directly to here. But otherwise, it's a standard board. In fact, you can actually desolder these components and put them onto an American motherboard and use that on the Panasonic Q. But what we're going to be doing today is installing the Picoboot, which is going to be in this region down here. And we're also going to go ahead and change the region of this console so that it's American, because the guy who owns this wants to use his USA discs on it, and he's not really planning on using imports whatsoever. So what I'm going to be doing is converting this to an American console. Okay, so in order to convert this motherboard into a North American console, what we have to do is bridge 2 points right over here. So if it's a Japanese console, what you'll see is that there's a resistor right over here on R5, and R6 is deliberately left empty. Now, in an American console, the opposite is true. R5 is left empty, and there's a component in R6. So in this case, what we're going to be doing is just taking a little piece of 30 gauge Kynar wire, and I've already tinned it with some fresh solder, and I also tinned these pads so that they are ready to go. And then we're going to add some flux, and we're just going to bridge these 2 points on R6. And by doing this, when the console boots up, everything is going to be as though it's a North American console. Okay, so as you can see, the region switch has happened right here. And just for those who are curious, you can also attach this to a physical switch and toggle between USA and Japan regions. And I've also made a video about that in the past with the Panasonic Q. So yeah, that's all taken care of. And now what we're going to do is prepare the motherboard for the Picoboot installation. So this is the Raspberry Pi Pico, and so I've already pre-flashed it with the necessary firmware. I've gone over that also in a separate video, so I'm not going to show you that again in this case, but it's also very simple and straightforward to do. And so basically what we're going to be doing is soldering 5 wires to the motherboard. One of them is your 3.3 volt power and ground, and then 3 other wires are going to be sent to the GP pins on the Pico. And so what we're going to do is go ahead and solder those wires. So we're going to have ground right over here, and we also have 2 wires that are going to be soldered down here for 3.3 and one of the GP pins. And right over here, we've got a wire that's going to be soldered to this leg here and also to this leg. And I'm going to route the wires in such a way that they come down so that I can take them and bring them out through the front over here. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with that. Okay, so all of the Picoboot connections are complete, and so we've got our 3.3 volts right here, our ground is this blue wire right here, and then we've got GP4, GP5, and then GP6 and 7 all wired in right here. So now all of our work on the motherboard is actually complete, so the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and start reassembling this crazy thing and seeing if it works. Okay, so as you can see, I have partially reassembled the Panasonic Q. And what I've done is I've decided to place the Pico right over here above player 1. This is where I have placed other mod chips on the Panasonic Q before, namely the Viper GC, because there's really nothing that gets in the way over here. And so as you can see, hopefully, I've bent up and removed a very small portion of the RF shield down here so that I could route the wires through. And I've already pre-tinned these 5 pads. So we've got our ground, we've got our 3.3 volts, and then we've got our GP4, 5, 6, and 7. So now all I've got to do is just route these so that they go to their respective locations. And then I'm going to go ahead and continue with reassembling the console. Okay, so all the wiring is now finished with the Pico, and so you can see here's our 3.3 volt line, our ground, and then we've got GP4, GP5, and GP6 and 7 tied together. So that's about it. From here, we're gonna go ahead and continue reassembling the console, and then we're gonna test out both features. We'll test out the Picoboot, and we'll use an SD to SP2 and attach a micro SD card running Swiss, put that on the underside of the console, and we'll see if we can boot into that. And then we'll also just boot into the main menu and see if everything is in English. All right, so we'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm at the point where I'm going to reconnect the DVD drive, and unfortunately, I am definitely going to be holding off on repairing it because this is the bottom spindle right here, and you can see that the flex cable on it got completely chewed up and ruined. So unfortunately, this piece is no longer functional. So I'm either going to have to try to find a replacement flex cable here, or maybe this actual part, which thankfully I found the information written right on it. So who knows? We'll see how that goes. But for now, there's definitely going to be no actual media being used on this Panasonic Q. So yeah, either way though, I want to reassemble this thing and show you how to do it correctly. And so what you want to do is start with the Gamecube portion right here. And this goes down like that. And then you need a machine screw over here to put it in place. Now the original isn't here, got lost somehow. So I'm just going to use a standard machine screw from my pile of parts to replace it. Okay, there we go. And now this next part is probably the toughest. So you need to get these two flex cables more or less out of the way. And I like to go with the closest ones first, just by pushing in, and I'm holding the board with my right index finger just to kind of keep it in place. And I know this probably isn't the best viewing angle, but again, this is hard enough to do in person, let alone film. But you see I have this first one in, and then the next one goes right here. Okay, and our final one goes right here. Okay, and we're going to reattach this power cord. Just go straight into there. And you just push that to lock it, and now we're basically good to go. Now we can go ahead and rotate this fully. Keep these two wires, or these two connectors up here, and then on the back it's going to go into those little locks that are positioned right there, right here and here. Okay, and that's how you reattach the DVD drive. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and continue assembling, and we're going to go ahead and test out these new features. All right, so the Panasonic Q is basically ready to go for a test, but I also had to make sure that the SD to SP2 is added as well. So if you open up the serial port 2 port, you're going to see that little PCB right here. So it just goes in like this. The outside side faces outside and vice versa, and it's got a little micro SD card on the inside, and that just has a copy of my Super Mario Sunshine game for testing, and it also has a copy of Swiss, which is this homebrew which allows you to play backups of your games and all sorts of cool stuff. I mean, it's a really outstanding program, and it's configured to work with the Picoboot. And so it's on there, and it's named B.doll, which means that if I hold down the B button during the booting sequence, it will go to the Swiss menu. Otherwise, it'll just go to the straight conventional menu. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is just test the conventional menu and make sure that that's in English, which means that our region mod worked. And then the second thing I'll do is power on the machine holding down the B button and see if we can get into Swiss. All right, so everything is plugged in. So you can either hit power, or I'm just going to go ahead and hit game, and that brings us straight into the Gamecube menu. All right, and looks like our DVD drive is not happy and just opening and closing at random. that's fine. I'll have to deal with that later. Like I said, this is still broken and I will have to deal with it in a future time. But all right, so it looks like everything is in English. So normally with a Panasonic Q, all of these menus are in Japanese, but as you can see on the screen, everything is in English. So that tells me that the region switch works, and this thing now thinks it's an American console. So that's great. So let me go ahead and power it off. And now if I hold down the B button and power it back on, hang on. Okay, let me go ahead and hold B and then power it on again. And now we should boot into Swiss. Okay, that looks good. So now we're in Swiss, and so I should be able to boot a game now from the SD card. Okay, success. All right, so even though this Panasonic Q isn't fully repaired, we can at least still use it to play games. And hopefully once I find a replacement part, I'll be able to finish refurbishing this disk drive and make it 100% operational. So yeah, that's it for this week's episode. Hopefully you guys find it useful. Just so you know, for now, I am still not taking Panasonic Q repairs and mods unless they're hand delivered, just because of how hard it is to ship these things. But if it's anything else, you can always contact me at oneuprestorations.com and I can try to help you guys out. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.